Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Thursday, the 27th of December. After we're done with this day, we've got 4 days left before we get to the new year. Hope everybody's Christmas, if you weren't here yesterday, hope everybody's Christmas was a good one. We are going to be talking about a lot of things tonight. Very, very busy out there with the weather tonight. When you look at the radar, especially when we get to that, you're going to notice that it is pretty impressive. You would think you were looking more at a late winter, early springtime blizzard than one at the end of December, but the cards that you are dealt with are the cards that you are dealt with, and that's just kind of how it works. And we're going to look at the long range that if you recall, over the last number of days, I've been emphasizing the fact that you're going to see a ton of model volatility going in either direction. You're going to see storms appear and disappear. That's just the nature of what's going on. I did see a number of posts in some weather groups on Facebook today. Some people just throwing their hands up, not understanding that the models, and they're going in all sorts of different directions depending on which model you look at, conflicting with each other in some cases in almost 180 degrees from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think this is all because of the fact that we're getting this big stratospheric warming event that is also being talked about all over the place in the weather world, and what its implications are. And if you think back to last February, when we had that happen on President's Day weekend, I can recall the 2 weeks that followed as we watched the process of the pattern just kind of grinding out a slow change to what it ultimately wound up to, that it was the same type of thing. We had a lot of volatility. We had a lot of volatility in the models from run to run, storms appearing and disappearing. It really took a couple of weeks for them to settle down to some degree where you could have a bit more confidence in them. So just bear that in mind. You should never live from weather model run to weather model run. It's a long haul process. And the pattern change is not, as we said last night when Joe Rayo was on, pattern change is not something that happens instantaneously. It is a process that takes place, and sometimes it can take several weeks to play out. And have an open mind as to where it's going to wind up, because ultimately we really don't know where that is. And we can wish cast, you can wish cast all you like to get it to a place where you might, you might like it if you're a snow lover, or perhaps you're not a snow lover. Either way, you have to kind of look at things objectively. So I want to just, at this point, just welcome tonight the folks that are watching from the SS Storm Chase and Forecast team from South Central Pennsylvania and North Central Maryland. The folks that are watching from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Storm Watch page on Facebook. Also from Angry Ben's Angry Weather, and from my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. And I'm just going to send out an invitation right now to my... okay, let me just finish typing this out. Okie dokie, going to send out an invitation right now to those that are on my weather app. And there it goes. So they should be joining us shortly. I have an app on Google Play. It's absolutely free. So if you have an Android device, that's good for you. Still waiting for that darn iPhone to get it on the App Store with Apple, and still not sure when. But if you've got the Android device and you're in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island, Hudson Valley area, this would work well for you. Although there's other stuff on there in terms of when I do some long range stuff that could apply to areas outside that particular geography. So I put the link up there on the chat board tonight, and You can also just go to Google Play and just Google my name, and it will come up. So let's get started. We've got a busy night ahead. We're looking at more rain, by the way, for the Northeast. And there's a lot of areas, a lot of stations that are very in the top 5 for annual rainfall, including the one that is in my neighborhood on central Long Island. It may fall just short of being the wettest year on record. I'm going to need about a little less than 3 inches between now and next Monday, and we could get 1 inch to 1.5 inches tomorrow, and then we'll see what happens Monday night, because it looks like the new year at Times Square in New York City is going to be coming in with some rain. But tonight, it's about a blizzard up in the northern plains where we have blizzard warnings. This area has actually shrunk a bit because this all got underway yesterday, but we still have a large area from northwest Kansas on up through central Nebraska into South Dakota, southeastern South Dakota, into Minnesota under winter storm warnings. And then we have the blizzard warnings that are up for much of the rest of northern and central South Dakota and the eastern half of North Dakota. We also have most of the state of New Mexico right now, except for the southeastern corner, is under a winter storm warning, and we also have winter storm watches up for the southernmost part of the state. And right near the center, there's a little orange box there. That actually covers Albuquerque, New Mexico, where there's a blizzard warning in effect. And winter weather advisories surrounding that back through Arizona and also on the eastern flank in a small portion of northwest Texas. We've got wind advisories going on in parts of central and southern California and in southwestern Nevada. And some winter storm watches have gone up for parts of northern Idaho and northwestern Montana. In the east, winter weather advisories are posted for much of New England, northern half of Connecticut northward, except for coastal Maine, and also for eastern New York, the middle and upper Hudson Valley. This is for the leading edge of precip that's going to be coming in with some, not a whole lot of snow with it, but then some sleet and freezing rain, maybe a coating to 1 inch or 2 of snow before you get into some sleet and freezing rain, and then ultimately to rain. Flood watches from New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, across Maryland through the Capital District for D.C. and Baltimore, much of the northwestern part of Virginia, down through western Virginia, western North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina, northern Georgia, much of Alabama, the central and southern Mississippi. We have a tornado watch that is shrinking but covers southeastern Louisiana, and there's a bunch of flash flood warnings that are up for parts of southeast Louisiana into southern Mississippi. So this is a pretty, as I said, a very impressive system overall. It shows up quite well on the satellite loop tonight. You can see the signature here. You can actually see the squall line that is fired up in parts of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. It's actually away from the risk area of where the Storm Prediction Center has its risk of severe weather. But the upper low with this, the strong upper air feature, the signature of that riding up through the northern plains and heading for the western Great Lakes. And then you can also see the energy that's dropping down into the southwest. And this is what's going to be bringing those winter storm conditions for Albuquerque. I was reading some of the local forecasts from that area, going for as much as 1 to 2 feet in some places, especially west of Albuquerque. I've never been to New Mexico. I'm told it's just an absolutely beautiful state. And one of these days, I will try to get there. I've been to 26 states in the United States. It's always been my goal to get to all 50 at some point. Now, rainfall with this, we have WPC 7-day rainfall. And, of course, the rain has been extensive with this system that's moving across. So we're looking at a pretty large area of 4 and 5 inch rainfall amounts from southeastern Louisiana on up into northern Georgia and eastern Tennessee. Further north, you're talking about, I think, about 1 inch or 2 for my area. And that will be enough to cause some flooding issues because the rivers here and streams are very high, so it's not going to take much to get them to go over the top and produce some flooding tomorrow. If we can wind up grinding out an inch to an inch and a half of rain, I think there will be some flooding issues along with the usual suspect spots. Fortunately, everything is moving along, so it'll be in it'll be moving in areas in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, southern New England, Long Island, New York City, the lower Hudson Valley. That rain is going to be coming in during the early morning hours, and it should be out by mid to late afternoon. So we'll put down what we put down, and then we're done for the weekend, and weather conditions are going to improve as we go into Saturday and Sunday. We were watching yesterday, we were talking about the possibility of a system for Sunday. That was something that the parallel GFS model was holding its hopes on. And I remember on my drive home, I happened to see the Icon model first. It was the other model that was doing something with it, and it just got rid of it. So that's when I kind of knew that the parallel GFS was not barking up the right tree. So that model, that's something to think about in the future when it comes to the storms. As I said, so you see them there, and then suddenly they're gone. And I think that also speaks to the volatile nature of what we're dealing with at the moment. The Storm Prediction Center has that, you see that shrinking tornado watch box that's up in southeastern Louisiana and parts of southern Mississippi. There is a slight to marginal risk of severe weather, but the storms actually extend further north, and they're producing some heavy rains from central Kentucky down through central Tennessee, and on up through northern Alabama, and now moving into the state of Georgia. All of this swinging to the northeast, and of course, you've also got a risk of thunderstorms possible in and around Iowa, where the low center is, where you got the low and the point of occlusion, and you've got the snow going on the northern fringe of this. So I'm going to get the radar up here so you can take a look. It really is very impressive to see this radar tonight. Hang on one moment, folks. We'll bring it up to the front and center on the top of the screen here. And look at that squall line that has set up. It's almost a perfect straight line of thunderstorms from southern Indiana, cutting through central Kentucky, central Tennessee, and then you kind of lose it a little bit, and then you start to see some of the heavier clusters of storms that are in southeastern Mississippi and also into southeastern Louisiana. So it's from this that we're going to get the severe weather. And there's that line, by the way, extends down across southeastern Louisiana out into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's still more work to do when it comes to the showers and storms that are going to be going on there. You've got rain in and around the Great Lakes, some rain moving now into western Pennsylvania. There really isn't too much going on that's close to my neck of the woods, and in the northeast, the radars here are quiet. They're probably going to start getting busy well after midnight. I don't think we're going to have any serious issues to deal with regards to rain until 4 or 5 a.m., and then it just rains pretty much into tomorrow afternoon. Up to the north, you've got the snows up through Minnesota, back into South Dakota, down into Nebraska. You see the upper feature just kind of spinning away here. Very well-defined system indeed. And now, of course, we're going to wait for that next energy that's coming down into the southwest. You're seeing some radar echo showing up across central Arizona and beginning to move into New Mexico. You don't always get a full feel for what's out there when you look at the radars out in the Rockies and down into the southwest. The mountains tend to get in the way, but it does look to be rather impressive in terms of the moisture feed. And you go up through the rest of California, up into the Pacific Northwest, pretty quiet, although we are seeing the beginnings of some showers coming in to the northwest. So, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I want to keep this full screen. I'm going to switch maps now. So we'll jump over to the surface map. And you can see how everything is analyzed. You've got low pressure. Let's see if there's a new one. There should be. Yep, this is the 21Z map from 4 p.m. And there's your low center in northwestern Iowa as it was analyzed. I know it's a little tough unless you're on a big screen, But you look at these 4 o'clock temperatures through the Dakotas, they were all at 50, just pretty much all at 15 or less, and snowing in a lot of locations. You've got temperatures, you get up into North Dakota, you've got temperatures in the single numbers, and teens and to near 20 down in Nebraska, 20s across much of Kansas, and then you start getting into the 30s when you go down into Oklahoma. There's enough cold air that's draining down on the west side of this. It's all draining southward into New Mexico, which is where all the warnings are up. The temperatures throughout much of Colorado right now, you have teens in the northwest, 20s to near 30 or upper 30s in a few spots, but you got mostly near 30 in a number of these stations, and you got 20s and teens. Again, all that cold air is going to continue to drain southward as energy moves along in the southern part of the jet stream. And meanwhile, you've got this massive warm sector that is pushed all the way up into southern Ohio and Kentucky. Into Kentucky and southern Illinois. You've got temperatures in the 60s and dew points in the low 60s. So yeah, it's a pretty saturated air mass that's coming up here with all this tropical air. Further south, you're seeing dew points into the 60s, temperatures in the 60s themselves, this strong front that's approaching. So it's all enough of a trigger. And of course, you've got this the warm front, which this is a good example of how, it's an example of how you wind up seeing that cool marine air just kind of wedges down into the Appalachians, where temperatures are in the 40s in western North Carolina and South Carolina, and even into parts of northeastern Georgia. That warm front just kind of gets hairpinned to the southwest. Gradually, this front is going to shoot all the way up, and it should make it to Maine and places further north, and that's why we're going for temperatures in the 50s. Otherwise, it's just a raw, rainy day throughout the the northern Ohio Valley, the lower Great Lakes. Temperatures up to 40 or higher, even up near Green Bay and into the upper peninsula of Michigan. So it's north and west of the low that we're seeing all these issues with regards to snow. Now, the snow has been falling, so this is the additional accumulation that is forecast to occur on top of what's fallen since yesterday. So it looks like a solid band of another 4 to 8 inches that is forecast throughout eastern South Dakota and on up into Minnesota. You're going to have a large area of geography here that's going to wind up with a foot plus. And there's your 12 to 18 in New Mexico with their winter storm warnings, and then some accumulating snows up in North Texas, extending back into Arizona. You've got some lighter amounts as you work your way up the Rockies and then into the Northwest, and then some very heavy snows in the Cascades. There's a 37 print there. I don't know how real it is, and there's a 66 print. It's just really crazy that they come up with numbers like this. But I mean, look, these are spots that not very many human beings get to. There are a number of places up there where you get observations where people don't live there, okay, through the mountain passes. But there are going to be some big snow amounts as you head up northward through the state of Washington. And one of these days, that's another place that I got to put on my list, is to head up into the Pacific Northwest, which I've been told is absolutely a spectacular part of the U.S. Okay, Storm Prediction Center, as we showed you, here's the risk area for today. Slight to marginal risk in that small area in the southeast, although the squall line of storms does extend northward, and there's this general area of thunderstorms that's up into the Ohio Valley. Let's just check tomorrow. And the Storm Prediction Center actually is also indicating a marginal risk of severe weather in the eastern Gulf states, on the Florida Panhandle, and through the southeast and on up into southern Virginia. That is going to be with the approaching weather front that is going on through, and the general area of thunderstorms that extends up into southern New Jersey. So pretty crazy that we're seeing, almost late winter, early spring-like storm here. But this happens from time to time, depending on what the pattern is. We've talked about the fact that there really has been a lack of cold air. You're just now getting some cold air coming back into the plains, which set up this blizzard. But the general lack of cold air is going to be problematic. All right, so we'll check with weather models, and the one thing I want to do first and get it out of the way is this split of the polar vortex in the stratosphere, and I want to just emphasize again, this is where planes fly. We're way up in the atmosphere, and this is a level where you basically have one low and one high. The dark blue is very cold air. The orange and red, that's all very, very warm air. And it's a pretty intense area of red here. So we're talking about a major warming. This is being described by some as perhaps a record warming from as long as NASA's been observing this stuff going back to the late 70s. Well, everything seems to be on course with this idea that the polar vortex, as that warm air attacks it, it weakens and then it splits in two. Part of it goes back into Siberia, part of it drops in to the northeast. It's separated in between by a large upper high. It's not often that you see an upper high in the wintertime kind of gravitate toward the North Pole. And the idea here is that cold air will get displaced southward on either side of this. But it's a bit more complex than that. And I think because of the fact that we have this warming going on that is at a bit of an extreme in way high up in the atmosphere, I think weather models are having a very, very difficult time handling it, and a very, very difficult time trying to figure out what the outcome of this is all going to be. And this process, by the way, this is 16 days we're talking about. So it's still going on at day 16. And you see how it changes. And at this level, we're seeing volatility from run to run as well. So it's not written in stone that it's going to split exactly the way the model has it. It seems to have been putting more emphasis on the upper low that settles up in Northern Europe and Siberia, with a weaker low into Canada. But there were runs back a few days ago that had the reverse. Again, it's a process. We're watching this split, and it's going to take time to work its way through to the bottom of the atmosphere. Again, as I said from the start, if you're thinking you're going to get an instant answer to any of the questions regarding where the upper pattern is going, it's just not going to happen. We're going to be talking about this for quite a while. So let's address first off the short range and get through the rain that we are going to get for tonight and Friday. And you can see that band of yellows and reds on the GFS indicating some pretty hefty rainfall amounts in the area indicated pretty close to what WPC had. It extends down into southern New Jersey and just off the south shore of Long Island. It moves out. We've got a cold high that builds in for the weekend, but there'll be some leftover mild air on Saturday. It'll get colder on Sunday. Now, the system for Sunday, you can see a little bulging there in the northwestern Gulf. It really amounts to nothing. There's the short wave that some of the models were picking up on getting ejected out of the planes wound up to be a lot weaker than analyzed, and there's just really no room for anything. The surface high, instead of going up into New England, now goes off the mid-Atlantic coast because there's a ridge building in the east for Sunday and Monday. And we've got another storm coming out of the plains. So the folks in Nebraska, Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota through Minnesota, with another cold high pressing down from the northwest, will see some snow here on Monday, New Year's Eve. It's not like what just happened, but there still could be potential for certainly some additional accumulation. The low is going to run up toward northern Ohio. We've got a warm front that's going to be headed in to the mid-Atlantic and northeast. So New Year's Eve, rain will be developing in Virginia during the morning, across Pennsylvania during the afternoon, and reaching New York City and southern New England later in the afternoon and in the evening, and then eventually moving its way up into central and northern New England, except for northernmost Maine. this is going to be another rain event all the way up. And that low by New Year's Day is in southern Maine. The trailing front is going to extend southward, and I think we're going to have to watch the trailing front to see if we wind up with another wave that will develop on it for later in the week. There certainly is some precip there, and you can see it. And there's cold air that is stretching out northeast, southwest from northern New England through the Great Lakes. The main push of cold air is more into Texas and down into the plains than into the east, at least initially. And as we move through next week, there is moisture, some overrunning moisture that extends from the Northwest Gulf through the Mid-Atlantic states. The GFS doesn't do much with this. The European actually did develop a surface low that it tries to take off the Virginia coast offshore later next week. It's been kind of going back and forth with that in terms of position and strength, but it's far enough offshore that at least for areas from the northern mid-Atlantic up into New England, that it would pass well to the south and east without any issues, and the late-run GFS does the same. After that, I think I still think we have to watch this. We'll have to watch it and see what the implications are with the upper air as we get closer. But at least from the standpoint of the GFS's view, it actually gets a bit on the mild side going into the first weekend of January with westerly isobars and southwest isobars from west of the Mississippi going into the Great Lakes. It almost has a bit of a blowtorch look to it until you get a cold front to come through around Monday, January 7th, and you get a cold high to come down. Then that high goes out. You get another cold front that comes through around the 9th or 10th, according to the world the GFS lives in. And then we have another shot of cold air moving into the east. There is the big problem with the GFS is the fact that, and we don't know if this is correct because this is where it has a major difference with the models. And I think this is part of the volatility that we're seeing. Now here's the GFS upper air on day 10. I want to go back actually one run because I want to show you how crazy it is. So this was the GFS's forecast 10 days from now from today's day run. And you have actually a fairly warm look to things overall. There's a big ridge in the east. You have a big ridge in the west. You got a trough that's in between the two of them. There's really not a whole lot of cold air to speak of. It's up in Canada waiting for some kind of mechanism to bring it down. But if you look over toward Greenland and on up into the upper right, that's all low pressure there. Okay, so there isn't, we'll call it blockiness. There isn't something up there in terms of higher pressure so that you would have a vortex down in eastern Canada funneling down cold air. Now, with that being said, here's the European for exactly the same time frame. Totally different. Okay, the European has a wrapped up vortex sitting over Hudson Bay. A very cold flow of air from northern Canada right down into Florida. I mean, cold air just comes straight down. Ridge up the Rockies into the Pacific Northwest. A rather deep trough in the east that's bringing down some very cold air. They are so opposite of each other that when I saw this, it just kind of I guess I shouldn't be shocked by it. When I saw it and saw the differences in the two models, I kept asking myself, how does it look at the same stuff and then come to, you expect to see some differences. And sometimes the differences could be of size, but this is one extreme to the other. The big difference in the European versus the GFS is that the European develops a blocky signature over Greenland. If you watch it, it comes in from Europe and over Iceland, and right here it starts to appear even at 120 hours, and then it relaxes a bit and then it strengthens again. But the European, if you watch this upper low, here's the system the one that's impacting New Mexico now is the upper low that's dropping southward and is going down into Mexico itself. There's another short wave that drops down, and that one is what the European has with a surface low that runs across the south later next week and is off the east coast next weekend. All of that happening while you have a strengthening upper low to the north that is swinging around and getting ready to send down some very cold air. So take your pick. You can go from one extreme to the other. And you've got this blockier look up around Greenland, and that, again, is the big difference. We can't look at teleconnection numbers just to kind of see, what the valuations are and what the trends are because of the government shutdown. That part of NOAA was deemed non-essential, so they are furloughed. So we won't be getting the Ensemble teleconnection numbers and the charts from them until they come back to work and the government goes. The shutdown ends. So we'll have to wing it and use our heads, which I think is a much better exercise. This way you get a real feel for how the upper air functions here. The European, by the way, has support from the Canadian model, which also has a strong ridge up in the west and a very deep trough here in the east in its long range. I haven't looked at it yet, so we're going to look at it together. We'll look at the parallel GFS and see what that has. And here, too, the parallel GFS, in spite of the big error that it made for Sunday, is doing the same thing. I'm just going to back up the parallel GFS. While there is some ridging in the east next week, it's not I don't think it's as strong as what the operational GFS has. And now you've got this setup of a vortex. It looks like the vortex on the parallel GFS is a little bit further to the east than on the European, but it's still there, and you still have a pretty cold flow of air coming down from northern Canada into the northeast, into the east. So take your pick for next weekend. 40s and 50s, or teens and 20s. Which is it? And I guess the fact that three of the models are on the same page, and if you're looking at the whole splitting of the polar vortex going on in the stratosphere as leading to this conclusion, then you're going to want to side with the idea of the European, the parallel GFS and the Canadian model, and throw the operational GFS out. But listen, stranger things have happened. I've seen it before where the GFS has stood alone, and suddenly it winds up being there, and the other models wind up caving. The ensembles kind of look like they're leaning more towards the other models than the actual operational GFS. It still wants to keep troughing more than anything else in the east, rather than building a ridge there. But ensembles are a bunch of models all averaged together, and the further out in time you go, the smoother it's going to look. So I don't always get a whole lot of value out of using them. I know a lot of folks like to use them in the weather world. I'm not a huge fan of them. I'll look at them from time to time, but at the end of the day, you got to make your forecast. So if you're going to look at the ensembles all the time and do what they do, you're always going to wind up making an average forecast, and that's not what you want to shoot for. You want to shoot for above average. We got a little time, so we can actually. I didn't even look at the parallel GFS surface tonight. Hang on. Here we go. So let's back up as it loads. We'll put the precip here. I'm just kind of curious now. So there's our rain for tomorrow. Drier air for the weekend. There's that low. It still has more of a low off the southeast coast now. It's so much flatter. This is what it was bringing snow up to southern New England and up into New York State just as late as yesterday. That goes out. Then you've got the trough that's swinging eastward for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Low going into western New York. An east-west band of snow across the Great Lakes and back into the plains. And then we start to get colder around the middle of next week. Starting to see with that colder push of air more west than east. We see the model generating some ice in parts of northeastern Texas and southern Arkansas, northeastern Mississippi. Is it going to do anything with this? This is kind of like what the European has, where it takes a low out off the Carolinas and gone, and then we wait for another cold front. This is now at the point where you're getting that deep trough into the eastern states, and this is a significant push of cold air that goes into the east. It's not as far to the left. The European's trough axis is further left, so that would push the cold across also to include the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and pushing it down into the southeast and Florida. In this instance, more of the cold goes to the east and northeast as opposed to west and south. And then as we head into January 7th, I mean, it's cold, but doesn't look like there's, any big surface storms. Now you got a really solid cold shot when you get toward January 10th. There's a big high that comes down. So, this is where we are at that point. We're just kind of in the, we're well past the point of fiction land, so we don't even know if it's going to get there. Look, the bottom line is this. The atmosphere right now is in an extremely unstable place. It is there's a lot of volatility, a huge change going on in the atmosphere. The lower atmosphere is beginning, to adjust to that and make its changes. It's going to take a couple of weeks to play through. I don't know ultimately where we're going to wind up, but it will be interesting to watch, fun to watch, and at times, I guess, very frustrating to watch. Because I think we all, everybody wants the answer now, and you're not going to get it. But at least we know what we're dealing with, and we're going to have to watch to see all the other players. We're going to get some, is there going to be blocking or no? If it is, how strong is it going to be? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be more east or is it going to be more west? Are we going to get that vortex to wrap up in Hudson Bay, or are we going to wind up with a ridge there in the east if the trough wants to keep happening out in the west? I don't know. But it is, again, it's a very slow, very grinding process that we are all going to be part of, and we'll be doing it together here every night. So I'm on the board with you guys. Big hellos to everybody. Some nights I'm busier than others, and sometimes I can jump on the chat. I know some of you just jump on the chat the minute I post the time, which is fine, and it's great. And sometimes I have time to get involved in the conversation, and other nights I don't. And this was one of those nights that I just didn't have a chance to. Scott Druyan, I want to believe, but by the time everything is in place, we are in April. Please listen. Think back to last year in mid-February when it was very, very warm. We really didn't see the impact of the split in the stratosphere that happened in the middle part of February. That was President's Day weekend. It wasn't until we got into the first days of March that we finally had all the pieces set. It took a good 14 days more. It took a good 2 weeks plus for all of that change to work itself through the atmosphere. And then we wound up with that very stormy 3-week period where we had 4 nor'easters that impacted the northeastern part of the United States and down even to parts of the mid-Atlantic. So this goes back to what I said. You can't expect to, it's not like you're flipping a switch and turning on a light in a room. It's a process. It takes time. Anthony Orr, haven't seen you on in a while, Anthony. Anthony is our resident statistician, of course, along with Scott Briller now, who's always been coming up with some good stats, especially for the New York area. The SOI index is yeah, you're giving. See, this is something I don't often look at. It's strongly positive, which is usually not good for snow into the east. It's not a perfect indicator like anything that's out there. It's not a perfect indicator, but it is. It's basically signaling the condition. It's a coincident indicator because it is at least. It's signaling what we're seeing at the moment. It's not telling us what it's going to be 2 weeks from now. So you just got to hang in there, okay? If you're a snow lover, you're going to have to hang in there. You really don't have any choice. And by the way, I've seen it in some winters where it's been like this, and then all of a sudden, something comes out of nowhere. While all this turbulence is going on with the upper air, if in the next couple of weeks, if something winds up popping out of nowhere, don't be too shocked, okay? Just as you've watched these systems disappear inside the 3-day time span, you could also see stuff appear. The MJO has been terrible. This thing is the thing is polar vortex split can overcome the bad MJO readings. Plus, the MJO is forecasted to get a better phase by January 2nd. Anthony, you actually bring up something that I also read today. The folks that follow the MJO were also, they were throwing their hands up in frustration because of how they've changed in terms of the forecast and how volatile they've been in terms of their forecast for the Madden-Julian oscillation. It seems as if this whole as I said, this whole change that's going on in the stratosphere is just impacting models across the board and just making them schizophrenic from run to run. So again, you're a snow lover. You really have no choice. You have to be patient. Scott Druyan about the Canadian model. Yeah, I happened to look at it today. I did look at it today. When I saw that it kind of it matches up with the European and the parallel GFS. At least it seems to be, consistent with something rather than being out there doing some weird stuff, which has been doing from time to time. I'm just coming back, going back on the chat here to see if I didn't miss any questions. So let's see. Looks like pretty much got everybody on here. So I think that wraps it up for tonight. There really isn't too much more that I can add. Scott Briller pointing out, by the way, for the snow weenies, that since 1870 in New York City, as measured in Central Park, there have been only 4 years that the biggest snow for the entire winter occurred in October or November. Listen. Having gone through the winters up here in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which except for about 5 of them were all horror shows if you're a snow lover, don't be shocked. That was a 6 to 12-inch snowfall, and I lived at a time in the early 70s where we went 5 years here without a snowfall greater than 4 inches, okay? So if that winds up being the benchmark for the whole winter, wouldn't be a shock. And if the storm back a couple of weeks ago in the mid-Atlantic states, which produced 12 to 18, now at least that's a let's call it quote unquote a respectable top number. If that winds up being the benchmark for the whole winter, don't be surprised either. That's going to be a tough one to replicate in an area that many times doesn't see a big snowfall for years at a time. So we'll see. Got to watch this pattern evolve over the next couple of weeks, and it's gonna like I said, it's gonna require a lot of patience. As a forecaster, you have to go in there with no preconceived notion of where the finish is going to be, which is where my head is at. I'm just watching and observing, and let's see where we are. I guarantee you, when we're sitting here tomorrow night talking about this, I will have probably some new different things to say regarding what's happening with whatever adventures the models take us on during the overnight and during the day tomorrow. Okay, free app on Google Play. That is on there. The link That is for those of you who have Android devices. You're in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Lower Hudson Valley area, New York City, I should say. That app could be for you. It's absolutely free. It brings you more weather. You can watch the live stream right from the app because I do post it there. It streams live onto the app. Plus, you get my website posts and a lot more. And there's going to be an update, for those of you who have it. There's going to be an update of the app. We've added some new features, and hopefully that'll be out shortly. I know iPhone users, please be patient. It'll be out soon enough. I've got this theory, by the way, that the weather pattern is not going to complete its change until I get that iPhone app released, because then I'll have on both devices. I'll have the iPhone people on and bring more of an audience to here and to my and to the app, and then we can have then we can wind up having a snowstorm to deal with. So it's all contingent. The whole pattern change really is. It's not contingent on blocking. It's not contingent on the trough setting up at 80, but it's contingent on my iPhone app getting approved by Apple and getting it on the App Store. For those of you who want a complete weather experience, you can consider adding my weather platform on Patreon. As a subscription platform, it's just $2 a month, or the price of a cup of coffee. We do a lot of stuff on there that we don't do in other venues, not on Facebook, not on Twitter, and not on my website. And once I get things settled down with the holidays being over, I'm going to get back to the regular daily live streams just for Patreon members. So the link is up there for that, and you can also find that on my website too, as well. Or if you've got the app, you can go from the app and join Patreon. And thank you very much, by the way, for those who have done that. It's a great way to support what I'm doing. And let me just very quickly bring up one other way. For those of you who who shop on Amazon, as I say from time to time, there's my Amazon link. If you go to Amazon via my link, you get your stuff. Just search it. You get your stuff, whatever it is you're ordering, and Amazon throws a few cigars into, well, no longer my Christmas stocking, but they get me a few cigars. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So, schedule for tonight, we'll have the Joe and Joe Weather Show at about 9:20ish on Facebook, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Then tomorrow, back to our regular YouTube live stream at just right after the top of the hour, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And then we'll take ourselves into the weekend. And I'll let you know tomorrow what my weekend is going to be like. Johnny Quest, you're over the 100-inch mark by now, I would think. Yes, you'll be in your submarine. Where I am, my record, I think I got to get to 64 inches for it to be the wettest year on record. The old record's from back in 1989. I'm in central Long Island, and we're at about 61 3/4. So I need, I need about 2.5, a little 2 3/4 inches of rain to take out the record for central Long Island. So it might be a bit tough. But it may get close, so we'll see. All right, folks, have a great night. Thanks for being here, as always, and we'll see you tomorrow.